This is Global Tel Link. You have a prepaid call from an inmate at the Centinela State Prison, Centinela, California. This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded. You have a prepaid call. You will not be charged for this call. To accept this call, say or dial 5 now. Thank you for using Global Tel Link.
Okay, so right now in the last conversation we had, you were speaking about a cold case.
Yeah. So I got out, and I was out for a few months, and I ended up, me and two of my homeboys ended up getting into it with these dudes at this pad, and my homeboy ended up shooting two of the guys right there at the house where we had this little rumble at, and I ended up taking off on the run to Arizona because we were all over Crime Stoppers, and when I was in Arizona, they actually, the fugitive detail and the U.S. Marshals ended up coming out there and snatching up me and my homeboy and bringing us back, but they brought me back for murder and they brought him back for the other shooting, and yeah, it turned out that I had a warrant for my arrest for a cold case. My homeboy's dad had got caught with a meth lab, and he ended up rolling on my homeboy and me, and basically they had been investigating us for this murder for a long time, but they just didn't have nothing on it. You know what I mean? So this is what they needed, because now he basically was able to put some names and some faces to what had actually happened.
When you went to county jail, how long did you sit in county jail for, and did you take your case to trial or did you plead out?
Yeah, the first time when I got busted on this murder, I got busted in October of 2001. They brought me the next day from Phoenix, Arizona, back to Indio to Riverside County, and I sat there fighting my case. Well, I went to juvenile court, like I said before, because they had to bound me over to adult court because I was actually juvenile when I committed this murder. And then they end up, I stayed there fighting my case for 6.5 years, and I took it to trial. I ended up getting sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for murder murder with special circumstances, because they charged me for murder for hire, for financial gain, and execution style laying in wait. So they ended up finding me guilty the first time of life without. They gave me life without, and I came up to prison for 2 years, and my case got reversed, and I ended up going back down to the county after 2 years, and I ended up staying back down there the second time for like 5 years, and I ended up taking it to trial myself. I ended up going pro per and taking it to trial myself, because at that point in time I was like, I got nothing to lose. I already got life without. What else are they going to give me, And so I ended up going pro per, and I took it to trial myself, and I ended up, I did what two attorneys in two previous trials. I did what three attorneys in two previous trials couldn't do, and I ended up getting a second-degree murder for actually me and my co-defendant, the one who they say hired me to kill Mr. Gutierrez,
And how does one get ready to represent themselves? Do they have a law library where you could read up on the law? How do you mentally prepare to set up for battle in essence?
I mean, to be honest with you, when I went pro per, I did it basically. That was like a last ditch effort for me to just basically say, what, fuck it. I mean, if anybody's gonna throw my life away, it's gonna be me. I had no real intention of actually fighting my case. My plan was just to go in there, make a spectacle of the court, and just clown around, and like, that's how hopeless I was. That's how little I thought of the process. That's how unwilling I was to take responsibility for my actions. That's how much I minimized the situation, And so, as far as like preparing for it, in the beginning, like I said, I just was just going through the motions and just clowning around, but ultimately when I started, like you said, you mentioned a law library. So yeah, I had access to a law library. I started getting court orders so that I could get up to 60 hours a month in the law library, so I just would start studying. I started realizing, like, you know what, man, it's crazy, because in my first trial, my attorney was bullshit. My attorney, like, nothing. They gave me the bare minimum of a defense, and looking back, I didn't have nothing coming. The reality is I was guilty of this crime, and I should have taken responsibility for it from the very beginning, but when you're living that criminal lifestyle, when you're thinking like a criminal, you're in denial, and taking responsibility is not something that I was capable of at that point in my life. So I wasted the taxpayers' dollars. I wasted people's time. I victimized the family more. I victimized the witnesses by bringing them into the courtroom and subjecting them to that stuff. I put the cops through the bullshit, So the second time around, when I did it the second time around, I actually started digging a bunch of stuff up in my case, that, again, as a criminal, thinking like a criminal, I used it in my favor. You know what I mean? I used it in my favor to manipulate a jury, to manipulate, to spin a web in my favor, because the bottom line is I was guilty. I was guilty of what they charged me for. I was guilty, for murdering an innocent man. I was paid to murder him, and I did it. It was less about the money and more about being accepted by the people who asked me to do it, and it just, looking back on it, it's kind of embarrassing, to be honest with you, to think that, but again, like I said, I was 17 years old, and I thought like a kid, and so when I started digging through the case, I started digging up, like, different evidence, that I could have used in my favor, and ultimately that's what I ended up doing. I ended up presenting that evidence in court, and I spun a web, and my co-defendant, who had initially testified against me in the first trial, he still testified against me, but his statements were more beneficial to my objective. Like I said, not to take nothing away from it. You know what I mean? Like I thank God that I was able to get that second chance to get a second-degree murder, because I had life without possibility of parole. And even though I was a juvenile, and the law would have SB 9 would have changed things for me. They would, because they can't sentence juveniles to LWOP anymore. Eventually, I would have gotten the LWOP taken off. I would have had action to get to board. But fortunately for me, I got a second-degree conviction on the second trial, So it gives me an opportunity to transform my life. It gave me an opportunity, because when you're...
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
When you're in here serving life without the possibility of parole, you know what I mean? You immerse yourself in this lifestyle because you're hopeless. You're completely hopeless. You know what I mean? I came in here at 21, and from the second I walked through them doors, when the cops started questioning me about this murder, I knew I was never walking out of here again. At least that's how I believed it. So it was easy for me to come in here and get involved in the things that I did for so many years, because I was hopeless. So when I went back down in 2009 back to the county, and I started going pro per. Like I said, I went back down there just to run amok, and I was just happy to be back in my own county and just running amok, just acting a fool. So when I went pro per, again, I didn't go pro per to serve some justice. I went pro per to just to make a spectacle of the court. And if anybody was going to throw my life away, it was going to be me. I wasn't going to let some other bullshit lawyer go in there and give me the same bullshit defense they gave me the first time around. So but like I said, I was isolated. I was isolated because I was a gang member, and at that time I had control over my county jail, so they had me isolated. So all I could do was basically read legal shit, go to the law library, read legal shit, go to the law library, and I was digging through boxes and boxes of shit, and so I was able to dig up enough shit to kind of spin a web for myself that ultimately ended up benefiting me in the end. But I don't take that chance that even though I got it on some bullshit, I don't take it for granted. You know what I mean? Like, I thank God that I was able to get that life without taking off of me, and I thank God I was given the opportunity to earn my freedom one day,
How was it that you ended up back in court? Were you filing appeals while you were in prison, or did they make some type of mistake and they had to set up a whole new trial for you?
Yeah, so I came to prison prior to when I was doing jury selection. There's a thing, it's called Batson and Wheeler. It's a Batson and Wheeler motion, and so the district attorney kept throwing off all Hispanic jurors, and so what happens is basically it's prejudicial to the jury selection. When they do that, it's basically the jury is tainted by racism. So what happened is the district attorney kept throwing off nothing but Hispanic jurors, and my attorney kept, objecting, and the judge kept allowing her. So finally my attorney, he said, look, man, I'm asking for a mistrial, on Batson and Wheeler. And Batson and Wheeler is basically, if you happen to look it up, you'll see it's basically it's exactly that. You know what I mean? Like in a previous case in the Batson versus Wheeler, the prosecutor was throwing off all the. So basically, we have a right to a jury of our peers. But if you're throwing off, if I'm Mexican and you're throwing off nothing but Mexicans from my jury selection, and you're leaving nothing but whites or blacks or something, how can you tell me that I'm getting a jury of my peers? Now, if she would have actually went along and said, okay, I'm throwing off 2 Mexicans, I'm throwing off a white, I'm throwing off, she didn't do that. It was Mexican after Mexican after Mexican. So what ended up happening is the judge ended up granting our Batson and Wheeler motion, but when they grant that motion, they're supposed to throw the whole jury pool out and re-subpoena a jury pool, because at this point in time, every juror in the courtroom has been tainted by this racism that they're saying that the prosecutor exhibited by throwing out only Mexican jurors. So, but what the judge did is he said, okay, I'm granting your Batson and Wheeler motion, but I'm not going to waste any more of the court's time. I'll let you guys take it up in the appellate court. And my attorney sat down and she told me, hey, man, I'm not even going to waste my time right here. This is not a discretionary law. If he grants the Batson and Wheeler motion, he has to declare a mistrial. He has to start this whole process over. But because he's not doing that, she goes, I guarantee you'll.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
She said, I guarantee you'll be back on appeal. So essentially, that's what took place right there. I came to prison. I appealed it. And on the very first level of appeal, it came back. They sent me back. They remanded my case. We reversed my conviction and remanded my case for a new trial.
Thank you for answering that question. And then another question would be, the day you got sentenced, was it real? Like, how did you feel? Like, what do you remember about that day when you got sentenced?
Man, so the day that I got sentenced, it was kind of a trip, because I had picked up a bunch of cases while I was sitting in the county jail all those years. Like I said, I was hopeless, so I came up in here running amok. I wanted to build my name. I wanted, I had an objective, and that objective was to get as close as I could to them boys, and so I was willing to do anything to represent what I thought I stood for at that time. And so the whole thing was, I had a bunch of cases trailing my actual murder case. And so that month before, we had went into court, and my judge was telling the prosecutor, like, hey, man, what are we going to do with all these trailing cases? I want these trailing cases gone, like I want them to be, and so he basically told the district attorney, like, look, man, this guy's about to get life without the possibility of parole plus 10 years. He has to do his 10 years before he could even start doing this life without the possibility of parole. And my judge is actually, like, giving the district attorney a regañada, like, look, man, like, you work for the taxpayers. You know what I mean? Like, you're wasting taxpayers' dollars by trailing these cases. Like, let's be done with this so we can sentence him and send him on his way. So in my mind, I thought I was still going to be there. Like, I didn't expect it to go down the way it did that day. Like, they went and talked to the supervisor, and they came back and they said, look, we're going to throw out all his cases. So ultimately that day, the judge was like, look, man, I basically haven't. I have to give you life without. There's nothing I can do. You were found guilty of first degree special circumstances, and they sentenced me that day. It had been a long time coming, so I was already prepared for it. Like I told you, the day I walked into the county jail, when they busted me and I was in Phoenix, I already knew, like, when they came to talk to me about this murder, I knew that I was never going to walk out of here. So it was something I had expected, It was still, not to say that it didn't affect me in any way, shape, or form, but it was, by the time they actually gave me the sentence in court, I was already doing it,
You have 60 seconds remaining.
Do you want to do one more, or do you want to hold off until the next time you're available?
Yeah, we could do one more, and then I'll call it a night. Like I said, we got to get an early start tomorrow, but I'll do one more with you.